Hello everyone, welcome to the SEGA Saturn Shiro podcast, the only podcast that you'll love us or hate us. So, I think we wanted to skip on the intros for the most part. Dave, Kay, you guys are good skipping right now?
Yeah, why don't you tell us about what's new in your life?
So basically, just work, school. Got that fight stick, the Real Arcade Vulix edition. The one that's actually based off of the Vulix arcade cabinets that they have in Japan where they play. I think it's the most recent one for Taito in that case, because I think they have the X2 and the Vulix is for the newer ones.
Cool.
So that's been pretty neat. Kind of disappointed with the Hayabusa and the Kuro buttons, but I'm going to be switching that out for full Sumitsu LS56 and the Sumitsu buttons. So I'll post a picture of that up once I get that all down. Been playing some Saturn stuff in terms of that. I played some Nights in the Dreams with an arcade stick, which is kind of fun.
Oh yeah.
And that was kind of a blast. And just trying out our obscure game, which we'll go more into later on. But in terms
the arcade stick is digital, right? So
yeah,
it's kind of like playing with the D-pad, but just a little easier on your hands, right?
Yeah, a little bit easier on my fingers. So it's just a stick. So I haven't used the 3D controller before, so I'm not sure if it would be better on that one, but I kind of like it on the stick. It's like an arcade experience.
Sure.
But I'm a stickler like that. But yeah,
how much did that stick set you back?
Which one?
The Vulix model.
Well, it usually retails for about $300, but I got it for only about like $100.
Nice.
So the guy just wanted to get rid of it. I guess he had issues with its size, but I'm all for it because it means it doesn't move off my lap. It's kind of weird to get used to because it's so heavy. It's about 15 pounds. But once you get used to it, it's great. And I love it. I can't wait to see what it's like with the Sumitsu stuff, though.
Sweet.
Cool.
But yeah, that's about it.
Well, we starting something new, trying this out, this cast. Not sure if it's going to stick around, but doing a news of the week. There's been just a lot of news. And so the section is called Headlines for Saturn. First off, a couple of the moderators and owners of the Saturn Junkyard have put together their own podcast, and they released their first episode about a week and a half ago.
Titancast,
is that what they're calling it?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. So the Titancast, go check those guys out. They did a really great show.
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I can't wait to see what they do next.
So next up on our Facebook groups, one of the main ones that we're interacting with these days is the SEGA Collectors of America. And our own Dave has been added as a moderator over there. So congratulations to you, Dave.
Congrats, Mr. David.
Yeah, the Saturn Collectors of America. Chris approached me and said, hey, you want to be a mod? And I was like, why not? I'm here. I'm doing stuff. So yeah, it's fun and it's a lot of fun, just posting stuff, getting people engaged. I'm excited about this system. I still have been for, over 20 years now, and no signs of stopping. So it's fun to see new people latch onto the console and look into collecting for it. And I'm just trying to, help where I can. So it's fun.
Well, congratulations and
stepping up on your big boy pants.
Next up, I'm going to have Dave talk about this. The Netlink Zone, the gentleman that we interviewed during our last podcast, have put the website back online. Dave,
Cameron or Zaiden, he got the website back online. You can connect with your DreamPi. The settings are, I believe, on the Dreamcast Talk forums. It's a DNS redirect to the DreamPipe servers, but he's got the entire website reconstructed, and not only that, he has the ability to add more content as time goes on. So it's super exciting. There's all sorts of possibilities now. And just to reiterate what we said in the last cast, you're going to need the DreamPi to do online browsing through your Netlink. So it's the DreamPi if you want to do internet browsing and get on with the Planet web browser. And it's the Netlink over VoIP adapter if you're wanting to do the direct dial multiplayer for now. And hopefully soon they'll get some kind of software going with the DreamPi. But in the meantime, we got those two options. And so we've got Saturn online. So yeah, it's a very exciting. Shouts to Zaiden And shouts to Sega RPG Fan.
Shouts out.
For working on that. Yep.
All right. So next up in the exciting world of online auctions, a couple of mock-up designs for some Sega hardware that were based in the 32-bit era. We've actually seen videos of these posted right before those auctions came up. This all happened in the last 2 weeks. To talk about that, Dave wrote up a really nice little article in the Facebook groups, and I'd like for him to take it away.
Yeah, so about a month ago, we saw these surface for the first time on like a Twitter feed, and then like on I think it was a Brazilian video game blog site. So I think it's like one owner that has both of them. But basically what we're looking at here is a early mock-up of the Giga Drive, which was the early plan for a 32-bit console based on the System 32 arcade board. And the Giga Drive title was kind of a play on Mega Drive, and Hideki Sato designed it kind of to look a little bit like the CDX. At least that's kind of what it looks like. It's like an all-in-one form factor with the lid opening kind of like a CD player, and then the cartridge slot in the back. And I think at that time the idea would have been for it to play Genesis carts in addition to, having RAM upgrades and stuff like that. But in the arcade scene at that time, technology was just so disruptive, and everything was moving so fast. And once the Model 1 arcade board came out and they released Virtua Fighter, it literally took Japan and the rest of the world by storm. And that kind of caused them to take a step back and kind of rethink everything, because, just kind of the world was changing, gamers were changing, and 3D was the new big thing. So this older hardware wouldn't have been designed to handle any kind of 3D. So they scrapped that design. And what we see on eBay is really a non-working prototype. I don't even know if it has any guts inside, but it's basically like they had a design spec, based on the System 32, according to Sam Pettis in his book, Service Games, The Rise and Fall of Sega. And you're going to want to look into the Kamikaze console portion of that. But then shortly after that, they did, work on the beginning of what we now know as the Sega Saturn. It was like this champagne-looking console, and the lines were really kind of space age. There is a patent that exists for this model. So they actually patented that design, and you can find that patent on Google Patents, or you can find it on Sega Saturn Archive on Facebook. You can also find it on our Saturn Shiro podcast page. And
so I had a question real quick.
Oh yeah, sure.
So I'm looking at the 32-bit unit, the little one that looks like a little CD Walkman.
Yep. That's the Giga Drive.
That's the Giga Drive. Okay, so was that sort of the idea of they're essentially going to stick the 32X board inside of that somehow?
So this predates 32X.
I see. The Sega 32 arcade board.
Yeah, they were going to have an architecture that was similar to the System 32 arcade board. What the idea was that they would have a home console that would easily be able to accept System 32 ports, because that's where in 1992 to 93, that's where they thought home video gaming was going. That's what everybody wants, is System 32 arcade. But then, once the Model 1 came out and it blew everybody away, they realized everybody at home is going to want this. People didn't even care anymore about System 32. It was like overnight, everybody's view shifted over to 3D and like the Model 1 stuff. And then, of course, Model 1 only had like 4 games, and then they got Model 2 with Virtua Fighter 2. So technology was just going so quick, And so that's one of the things with Sega is they just, they did kind of realize that people wanted 3D, but not to the extent that I think Sony really saw that vision. They just said, we're just going to cut the bullshit and we're going to design a 3D console from the ground up. And then that's really what it's going to be, its strong point,
I gotcha. So could you go back into the champagne hardware?
So at the time you had the Sega CD. At that time would be time appropriate. The Sega CD did exist. And the Sega CD was the first dual processor console because it had the Motorola inside the Genesis working in tandem with the Motorola inside the CD unit. So that's where Sega got its kind of affinity for working with parallel processing. And that's what made them so confident to think that they could do it in the 32X and then do it in the Saturn. And that's why the Japanese executives were just so stubborn and so, insistent on going with the dual Hitachis versus Tom Kalinski's proposal to work with SGI. And so, of course, we know the story with that is that SGI went to Nintendo, and the rest is history.
So that design is gorgeous. Just for anyone who has not taken a chance to look at that video, we'll have some links in our group and when this cast gets put out. But
it's really sleek.
It is very pretty.
I like the little door for the controller ports, There's like a little click door.
Very pretty.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of like modern inclinations of Samus Aran's ship from Metroid.
Very much.
Flying through space on a Saturn.
Yeah. The thing is the molding on it, especially if you look at the bottom, there's like these cutaways. And I just think, for a mock-up, they were able to it's probably like a solid piece of plastic and then it's painted on the bottom. But to actually do that in production would have been just so expensive. And I think that's what kind of happened is all at that same time as they were, addressing the internals and the cost of the internals and then the unplanned need to upgrade and contend with Sony. I think they realized they had to cut costs wherever they could. And I do think that design would have been much more expensive to produce. It does look great, but I think the design that they ended up going with was a little safer. It was a little just more streamlined and easier to pump out of the factory.
And it still has remnants of that cutaway on the system itself.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I mean, you can see definitely where the design, came from and where it went to.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me a lot of looking at like the mock-ups for like the 2010 Italian Mustang versus what they actually ended up getting.
But I mean, if you guys are seeing it and thinking that this is, fake or that somebody's just like pumping out these, fraudulent consoles to get, internet fame, that is not the case. These are definitely design mock-ups, I guess, in the same way that cars are designed by, sculpting with clay.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that they have. It's not like the Nintendo PlayStation where it actually is a working prototype. Although Kay did mention how cool it would be to just take the guts of an existing Saturn and stick it inside one of those.
Yeah.
Inside that case, that would be rad. But yeah, I think it really is. Some people are balking at the $5,000 price tag, and it's a philosophical question whether it's worth it or not. But really, it's a piece of Sega's history, so nobody else has it.
Yep.
Only one person in the world is gonna have that, and it should be under glass. And who knows, maybe in a video game museum.
Dude, I wish I could afford it. I seriously would snatch that up in a heartbeat.
My question is, how the hell did they get these things in the first place? I mean, shouldn't these be under lock and key with Sega or in some sort of
how did the
headquarters?
Sony PlayStation or the Nintendo PlayStation get out there?
Well, that's a little bit different.
Yeah, that was an exec who had it in their basement or their.
It's the same thing, though, right? I mean, these prototypes, one-offs, like the orange Xbox, that should never have gotten loose to the public.
There are like there's NDAs that are signed that probably expire, and then people just don't care after 2 decades and.
Like, take it.
Sale or something, yeah. I mean, especially if they're like corporate types, they have no interest in video games. They're just like, doing it for the money.
Moving us forward a little bit, we got 2 more pieces of news before we get to our obscure game. Also hitting eBay this past week or so, the Japanese port or version of Scorcher went on sale. Now, what makes this unique and interesting, Scorcher is a pretty common game in English, Western-speaking territories. But it was set up and prepared to be released out in Japan. It had its manual ready, back art, the OBI spine card, and it just seems to have vanished. This has shown up on eBay a couple of times. I think the last time I was told it came up at about $400 or so. Don't know what it was, when that was.
Yeah.
But it has not been dumped to my knowledge in official circles.
I can't believe that.
The person that I believe owns the disc is actually a dumper for redump. and that's how I got wind of it before it hit eBay. But it's there. He's fishing for good offers. I don't know what those offers are going to be like, but he's got an asking price of about $5,000 on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not a bad game either. I mean, it's common and it's not great, and it's definitely a Western game if you look at the color palette and stuff like that. But Scavenger, they were doing some interesting things too. I've popped it in a few times and come to grips with those controls, and I think it's interesting. I don't know that Scorcher. Scavenger is the company that developed it, and they had a couple other really interesting, really graphically, pushing the Saturn's hardware games in mind that were pictured in like the old Saturn magazines and in the next gen magazines that just never came to fruition. But it was an interesting Western developer, and I don't know that it would have gone over too well in Japan. So it's probably best that it wasn't released. But that's amazing that it hasn't been dumped when you consider some of the other things out there that have.
Yeah. Speaking of which, my buddy Don Russell has a bunch of his prototypes up on eBay. They have hit since probably late September, and I was fortunate enough and to be trusted with a lot of his prototypes. One buyer has apparently worked out a deal with Don to put the game Crime Patrol on layaway. It is through eBay. Not all the details are known, but the person who did this owns the website SEGA-Saturn.net and has released several unreleased games in the past. Now, there's a lot of controversy going on. I'm directly involved with this. You can see a lot of it on the assembler forums if you really want to, go through that drama. But the ending point is this: the image that person has on his website right now. You can go to his website right this minute and download the image. That image was altered by me before he got it, just to see how trustworthy he was going to be with my friend's property. As a result, since it's still up, and as long as it remains up, I will be providing an unaltered image for people to download starting, I believe, next week. We'll post links to that when it gets released through our podcast Facebook page and our Twitter and such.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that's the end of our news, and that brings us to our obscure game of the cast, which would be
Rabbit, which is my choice.
But why did you choose Rabbit for?
Why did I choose Rabbit? Well, I had a few games to pick from, and this was probably the most affordable at $50. But what do you expect? If it's obscure and it's on the Saturn, then that means it probably didn't get many prints, which means it's probably going to be a little bit more expensive of a game. But at least, at $50, you can either burn it, and if you like it, you can give it a shot. But
what kind of game is it?
This is a fighting game, and it's a fighting game by an Osaka-based developer called Aorn, which isn't exactly easy to pronounce in Japanese or English. But it's Aorn. And so this is a fighting game that it has like this really vibrant color palette. It's got really sharp sprite work. The intro is kind of cheesy. But the whole idea of this game is that each character has a spirit animal, and the spirit animal can kind of help back them up and do, collaborative combos during the game. And, you have a power meter that builds up, and then you can unleash your spirit animal for extra damage. It's a really interesting fighting game, and it reminds me a lot. I was telling Kay and Patrick, it reminds me a lot of Far East of Eden Kabuki Clash on the Neo Geo. So if you guys that's also kind of another obscure title, but another great fighting game. And they just have the same kind of flavor. I was kind of looking into this, and this is pure speculation, but I'm just going to put this out there, and maybe you guys can get online and do some digging. But the developer for this game, Rabbit, on the Saturn is Aorn, which was a developer put together by EA, Electronic Arts, in March of 1995 so that they could release this game. So that they could do like a couple of arcade conversions. And then in April of 95, so you have March of 95, Aorn was incorporated. And then in April of 95, another Osaka developer came into existence, and that's Rakujin. What we know now as Rakujin, but back then it was like Rakudim or something. And they did Far East of Eden Kabuki Clash. So it's really interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I just know that they look very visually similar. And again, this is pure speculation, but it was just something that I was kind of looking at. Another interesting thing about the game is that it's an EA game that was published in Japan only. So Electronic Arts actually published some games in Japan, which is interesting.
That is really interesting.
I'm looking in the manual. I mean, they even advertise in games like you got NHL 97, PGA Tour 97, and some other game I can't make out.
Yeah, so there was, according to GDRI, which is a Game Developer Research Institute, they list this Aorn as only having developed an arcade game called Flame Gunner. And then they did Rabbit, which was also published in the arcades by EA. So EA also published arcade games. Interesting. And then Rabbit 2, there's a question mark, so I don't know. There's not any more information about that. But then there's a PlayStation game, Art and Senna, and then the Saturn game. But then, yeah, funny enough, like 1 month later, also Osaka based. And then you got this thing about they changed their name to Rakujin in the year 2000 because they decided that it was more easy to pronounce in Japanese. But all these things are kind of, coincidental, make me think that maybe it's the same developer.
Let's actually go into the game, if that's all right.
Yeah. I mean, what else do you guys want to know? I mean, here's the thing. It's an obscure game that isn't complete garbage. Like, it's actually a pretty fun fighting game. It's very flamboyant. It's very kind of like, it's one of those wild fighting games that Kay was kind of talking about, where it's not really straightforward.
Yeah, I really like it because it reminds me of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure on the Dreamcast a bit.
You agree?
Not quite.
Not quite, but it's similar in the... You're talking about like the stands, right?
A little bit, because it works a similar way where you can have a button to bring out the stands or spirit animals, whatever the hell they're called in the game. Mm-hmm. And you can have them attack like loosely. Like I was using the Kitsune one, and all it did was like shoot its tail. But exactly. I did notice that if you used her special, or the person's special, you wouldn't be able to bring the thing out again.
Right.
I don't know if you ran into that, or maybe that was just me.
I didn't play with that character, but I think I know what you're talking about. I played with Hoenn. He's the big guy with the wolf, and he's got like a mask on. Just really, really like over the top combos, and I noticed like the face animation and stuff when he gets hit, or like when he does damage to an opponent. It's just like really, it's over the top. And I don't know if you guys know. Did you notice, Patrick, any kind of like scaling problems?
What do you mean scaling? Well, there is some lag in it.
No, but like at some points the sprite work would be like perfectly crisp and look like it was the correct resolution, but then sometimes the sprites would like be scaled strangely.
Yeah, I didn't notice that per se. I just noticed that it lagged a bit, and the intro graphics kind of like shite.
They kind of do, yeah.
So overall, we've got another kind of wacky, offbeat fighting game. Pretty decently priced still. Decent gameplay, maybe a little bit off on the intro graphics and possibly some scaling issues. Overall, you guys, what would you give this game if you had to give it a rating out of 10?
I give it a 7. It's a really decent fighting game, and I think it's one of those weird ones like Groove On Fight that's good to bring with your friends and just mess around with.
Yeah, that's where I'm at, like a 75%. It's reminiscent of like Galaxy Fight. It's reminiscent of that other one, Astro Superstars. It's wacky. It's definitely offbeat. And with a name like Rabbit, I can imagine people would just pass that up, if they were looking on a list of games, because it just doesn't strike you. I think Rabbit is one character. It's like the spirit animal of the first character, but you hardly see that character if you don't play as him. But anyway, it's just, it's offbeat, and it would be fun to just pop in and show people that are like into the Saturn, but maybe they have never seen it, for $50. You might even be able to get it for like 40 to 45 if you're patient. Yeah,
that sounds cool. All right, guys, so let's go into our main topic now, which is going to be love and hate. So games that have a love-or-hate relationship where they're either really good and you love it, or they're really bad and you don't like them, and there's no in-between on them.
Yeah, so they're very polarizing games.
Exactly. So let's go jumping head first and go into the People's Choice poll. So these are the poll that we put on. Was it the Sega Collectors of America group?
Yeah. So I put up a poll, about a week and a half ago. Just wanted to see. We have our own opinions about games that we might love, but other members of our cast have wrong opinions about how they're bad. Just looking at Mr. Bones and Pat.
Sorry, the game looks like shit.
But we wanted to see what other people's opinions were. And we had Clockwork Knight come in the entire series as having 14 votes. Now, these votes, they don't necessarily mean it's only hate or only love. These votes are just, these people mentioned that this is a game that they feel very strongly about one way or the other.
About it, yeah.
Yeah. Burning Rangers came in with 9 votes in second place. Mr. Bones had 6 votes. I saw Patrick there, posting his opinion on it. House of the Dead hit 5. Sonic R hit 5. Albert Odyssey. I've been hearing a lot about this one, and so it's definitely become a polarizing game in the last few years at least. 4 votes there. Fighters Megamix came in with 3. Dragon's Force came in with 3. Radiant Silvergun came in with 3. And
no idea how that made it on there.
Oh, I put it there. That's why. But the fact that other people voted on it is what's interesting. The one that I found the most interesting, we had a lot of other options that were there, various states of 2 and 1 vote. But someone actually put in Super Carrion. And this is a really rare demo disc. It's not even like a full game, and it probably would run someone anywhere from $20 to $50. Rarity does not equal a high price, but the fact that someone even knew about that game and then decided to put it in a love-hate section of a poll was kind of interesting.
Smart.
Yeah. So let's start off with one that was on all of our own lists. I think all of us put Clockwork Knight as being something that would be very polarizing.
I hate.
No.
I'm gonna go with hate on that one.
Round 1. Fight!
Okay, you go first, David. Why do you love this game so much even though it looks like shit?
Okay, well, first of all, it looks like shit based on, maybe based on, if you're playing PS4 games all day.
It just hasn't, even back then, people were saying how it doesn't look the greatest.
Yeah, here's what I can say about Clockwork Knight. It is brimming with charm. It is brimming with Sega style. And I know that's kind of an intangible thing, but if you're a big Sega fan like me, it's just they have kind of like a different way of approaching game design and character design. And it's just some of the stuff comes from left field, but that's the thing that I like so much about Sega. And, Clockwork Knight, it is, again, with the Saturn, they were like trying all these new things and like introducing you to so many new characters like Panzer Dragoon, Clockwork Knight, Bug, Knights. Rather than like falling back on like their known brands, and so it was a new thing for sure, and not necessarily what people were maybe wanting, but for one, it had great control. Like the game just has a great feel. Like you pick up that D-pad and it just feels right. The throwing mechanic, the just all the little things like the train that you can ride and the donkey or the horse or whatever that is, and just the picking up gears and stuff. It's just a solid platformer. It really is. I think that it's like beautiful game design. The only thing I can really say negative about it is that it doesn't have a save feature, if I remember correct. I don't remember if you can save in it or not.
I don't remember either. It's been a long time since
I don't remember. I feel stupid that I don't know the answer to that off the bat, but I will say, they kind of had to rush out the first portion of it when they were planning for it to be an entire game. So you really, when you bought Clockwork Knight 1, you were really just getting half the game. And then when you bought Clockwork Knight 2, you were getting the second half. And, it was a little bit more polished because they had some extra time to like work out some things. But
Sega Retro does confirm that if you are unable to save your progress in that game. So if you turn off the Saturn, you start from the beginning.
Right.
Gross.
So it's pretty punishing. Same thing with Panzer Dragoon. You know, it was from Sega, you know, and they're an arcade developer. They're really focused on, you know, sitting down in gameplay sessions, you know, like really just beating the game in one sitting. And I know that's tough nowadays. I mean, it was tough at the time too, but I think we forgave these things a little more back then.
I definitely agree in some of those aspects, but the one thing that really kills it for me is just that I think the game just aged. It looked bad back then. It hasn't aged well. The enemy attacking just isn't satisfying as him twirling in a circle. I just don't really felt it. It felt like there wasn't like a satisfying destroy enemies like you hit them. It has that DKC style, the pre-rendered stuff, which I just don't like, and I always hated in Donkey Kong Country. But that's another hatred cast. I
think it was a little better though. I'm also not a huge fan of Donkey Kong Country, but I don't know. There's just something charming about it. Uses pre-rendered, and then it also uses polygonal graphics that fall at you like into the foreground. It's a weird looking game. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
I know why people hate it. I think they think that it's a little cheesy. It's too over the top. Maybe they don't like the music. It's like they think it's schmaltzy. It's like for all of those things, those are the reasons that I like it, because I feel like it's just quirky. So unique. It's, you know, you just don't get games like that anymore. And
probably for the best.
You know, I mean, that's fair enough. Everybody has their tastes, you know, and you know, and I don't want to go too long on this game, but you know, I just think Clockwork Knight it epitomizes what the Saturn was. It epitomizes Sega, and it epitomizes what the Saturn was, which was really just like this oddball experiment, quirky, daring, and like careless, like super reckless. They would put games out that would, like, I'm sure in a boardroom just would make no sense, you know?
Yeah, I really see your point on it though, and I guess really just in closing on it, I guess this really is a victim of circumstance. It was the first Sega game. It was getting pushed out due to the surprise announcement of it, and just one thing after another that left it unfinished. And maybe it could have been better. Maybe it was just the same, just as worse.
Pat, everything that you've said seems to deal with visual aesthetics. Like, if you closed your eyes to the aesthetics, or if we had updated graphic files for that thing and it looked differently. Would the gameplay be satisfying to you?
I don't really think so. I'm not really a big fan of that style of platformer. But like I said, this is all opinion, and I just don't really like the mechanics of how enemies are taken down, how the bosses are battled, and just
I think it's a popular opinion too. I mean, this is a game that is very maligned, so I don't feel like it's universally loved at all, and it certainly wasn't universally loved back in the day. You know. A lot of the critic magazines, you know, were hard on it. By the way, I think it's worth mentioning, it did come out before Toy Story, the movie. It actually came out and was in development before Toy Story, so a lot of people think it was like copying them, but it wasn't. Just a coincidence.
So let's look at our next Polarizing game on our list, Burning Rangers.
I'm surprised this was on here, to be honest.
So I threw this out there because I had a problem with it. This is one of my picks that I threw into the poll in the beginning. And it's not so much the gameplay. It feels like they were, for me, that this was rushed. It was a lot of graphical breakage. And it just didn't seem like... It seemed like if they had just spent another 3 months or so on optimizing it, that it would have been a completely solid game. And some of the commentary that was in the thread also mentioned that it felt like it was more of a beta of something. So I wanted to get your guys' opinion on this, you know, fight for it.
All right, so is there if I start off, Dave?
Yeah, go ahead.
So basically... I kind of feel the same way. I think it was in that time where it's like Sega knew the Saturn was pretty much donezo, and Sonic Team, they just were rushing Sonic Team to finish that game up because they were going to throw them right on Sonic Adventure after that point. It's like, okay, we got to finish this up, wrap it up. And just constantly telling them to do that. I mean, just trying to get this game out there so that way they can put the nail into the Saturn and start fresh on the Dreamcast. So I'm not really 100% sure if Burning Rangers came after Sonic Jam. I'm not sure if this came after or before Sonic Jam. But I do believe that that's probably one of the reasons why it really...
Well, Sonic Jam was Sonic Team, but it was like kind of like one of their B departments. It was kind of like the away team.
Yeah, so I just think it, like I said on the last one, is a victim of circumstance. In my opinion, I really like it. I think the gameplay concepts there. I really enjoy the music on it. The nice MIDI soundtrack. It's got that Sonic Team feel, and definitely with the aesthetics of the characters, just like Phantasy Star. I don't know if you guys noticed that there. It gave a Phantasy Star stuff.
Oh yeah,
a Phantasy Star vibe.
Absolutely. I feel like PSO kind of felt very reminiscent of Burning Rangers. And I'm not surprised at all, because I think they recycled some resources and some ideas that maybe they didn't put into Burning Rangers. I'm actually going to completely disagree with Kay.
Well, I love it.
Oh yeah, no, I love it, but I'm gonna speak to what Kay said about like the design and the development and stuff like that. So if you go and you listen to Kamikaze Console by Sam Pettis, you will get some interview excerpts from Yuji Naka talking about how he held back with Knights and how he learned a lot of things from Knights, but that he felt that it wasn't his complete vision, that he played it safe, and that there were a lot of elements that he wanted to include in Knights that he held back for his next game. And the next game, they would work for a very long time trying to iron out and get it going. And then the other little piece of, if you guys are interested, there is a YouTuber called Low Score Boy, and he put out an amazing video that really breaks down what the Saturn is doing graphically, technically with Burning Rangers. And the truth is, the reason why it looks broken almost is because it's doing shit that it shouldn't even be doing. Like the way that they wrote the information to the frame buffer was completely ass backwards. Like they would use tricks to be able to use like multiple transparencies at the same time. I think it's just a technical marvel, to be honest with you. And I know that some people say that it looks like garbage in motion, and or it looks like, the Saturn just threw up on the screen. Yeah. And I get that. And I love it despite that. I do realize that when you turn on the Saturn with Burning Rangers in it, your Saturn's like, it's really being made to work overtime, Sure. And my Saturn even heats up a little bit more than it normally does when I'm running Burning Rangers. So, I don't think it was a matter of time, really. I think they had plenty of time to work on it. I think that they were doing some really unorthodox stuff with the hardware to try to squeeze every last drop.
Well, it
just understandable.
I was looking at the release dates, and Burning Rangers released 8 months before Sonic Adventure was one out. So I guarantee you that both Sonic Adventure and Burning Rangers were being developed at the exact same time, especially with the Dreamcast stuff.
But Burning Rangers was being developed at the same time as Knights too, because it was based on the engine. So it was like they were working it all on. It was kind of like one bled right into the other.
I suppose so.
The point, though, is that it looks like it needed more development time. So from a layman's perspective, someone who's not, geeking out on the tech and looking at this as
I'm biased. It's true.
Right. Yeah. And because you have that extra insight, because you've done that additional, work in researching,
I'm able to appreciate that side of it.
You can appreciate that, but someone who just picks this game up and is looking at $150 plus price tag on it, puts it in their system and goes, "What the f?"
200, 225 or 250. It's ridiculous.
Good Lord.
Yeah, and you're right. You're right. If you're just judging this on you're saying, okay, well over here I've got Vagrant Story, or I've got Metal Gear Solid, and over here I've got Burning Rangers. Something's not right. So it's true.
I love the game. I need to make sure that this is put out. I actually love what they were doing, and I like how they use audio cues to be able to let you know where to go. Things about this game were interesting to me, but for what I've heard from other people, and it was proven as being like number 2 in our list, this is a game that's polarizing. Some people who love it and can appreciate it tout its its greatness. Then people pick it up based on that, and they go, "What the f?"
Absolutely.
So let's look at our next one, Mr. Bones.
Oh,
So we went over this game a little bit during the Halloween special a few weeks back. And this is one of my personal favorites, even though I've never actually gone past the first disc. I love quirky games. So Clockwork Knight for me was one of those that I liked. Not gotten very far, but it's quirky and it's different. I don't like all quirky games, but Mr. Bones has kind of that dark feel to me, a little bit on the gothy side, for being cartoony and cheesy. But that it appealed to me. And there's nothing else like it, which we kind of talked about with Knights as well. There was nothing else like Knights. A lot of the games on the Saturn, there's nothing else like it. Or it's compared to things that just have similar elements.
Exactly.
Mr. Bones, for the first time, I think, ever, I met someone who didn't like it. And I'd like you to start off, Pat.
All right. Well, I guess basically I have a really... This is more opinion-based, but I really don't like a lot of the early 3D games. Especially stuff like, Clockwork Knight, and especially Mr. Bones. I just think it has really an ugly aesthetic on it, and it doesn't really know what style it wants to go with. I mean, you have the things like the real-life cutscenes where it's like him talking to a real-life character playing a guitar as a 3D model, jumping around in a 3D world using some sort of different-looking model. And I just really didn't like the feel of the gameplay. I just think the platformer is really clunky. I didn't play as much as I like my platformers I usually play. And I guess I'm coming from a bias from a 2D perspective where it's like, if you want to do 2D platformers, just do a 2D platformer. Don't go 3D,
Sure. So you're saying it's graphically inconsistent?
A bit graphically inconsistent. The gameplay, I'm not the biggest fan of.
Yeah, I hear you.
So, is there a Saturn platformer? Just I'm taking away from Mr. Bones for a moment, but is there a Saturn platformer that you actually enjoyed?
I really enjoyed Twinkle Star Sprite too. That was really fun. Does Elevator Action count as a platformer? Elevator Action Returns.
I mean, there are platforms. It's like an arcade action game.
Well, I won't count that then if it's.
I guess I would count it as like a run and gun.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. There's not really a lot of platformers on the Saturn to begin with, though.
Well, I mean, we've talked about a couple of them, like Gex and
Rayman.
Clockwork Knight.
Oh, Rayman's good. I like Rayman.
You like Rayman? Okay.
But that's multi-platform, so I don't really know if I'd count that.
So, going back to Mr. Bones, I can see the graphic inconsistency.
Just the age of it.
When we last left it, it sounded like you were interested in taking it out for another spin and giving it another chance. Did you ever actually get a chance to?
I didn't get a huge amount of time. I played a little bit of it, and when I played, I didn't really feel it. I really think I need to get a full play of the game just to be able to give my 100% opinion. So I don't want to say that this is a definite, but what I played and what I understand, I don't like it. But that might change. Maybe if I play it a while and I get it. But I don't know. Just
to reiterate what we talked about in the Halloween cast is it's actually not just a platform game. It's multi-genre. So if you're able to get past that first level, you're going to be opened up to like all these different genres. It's like a mashup game. So it's really interesting, Maybe you should just Game Shark it, just to get over that one level and kind of, see what the rest of the game is like.
That would require me to flash my action replay that's already flashed.
Mod chip.
Dun dun dun.
Dun dun dun. It's okay though. I get it too. I don't think this is one of those hills that I would die on. I like the game a lot, like Kay does, and I do admit to liking quirky games. And I'm really biased when it comes to Sega stuff, and this game is just dripping Sega. Mm-hmm. So that's one of those points where I kind of have to step back and look at it a little bit more objectively, like any other Joe gamer would come along and look at it critically, and I do think that it has flaws, and I do think that I kind of agree with the things that you're saying about graphic inconsistency. I know you didn't like the US box art. The Japanese box art was even weirder, but and I understand that control wise it might feel a little clunkier. I mean, that kind of adds to the suspense for me, because honestly, it's almost like one of those dreams where, you know, you're trying to get away from zombies, but there's some, you know, ball and chain tied to your foot, and you're kind of like, you know, because you kind of get that sense that you're just barely escaping them, you know, and you're jumping over the graves, but then your foot gets caught on the gravestone, you know. It's definitely one of those hardcore kind of like punishing games where you just feel like it's a little unfair, but it doesn't hold your hand, that's for sure.
Yeah, and you know, maybe I'll give it a try again and I'll really like it, but you know, from what I played of it, I mean, not looking like it.
Are there codes, Kay, on this game, or can you like without a Game Shark, are there like any kind of codes? Yeah, stage select or something like that.
You know, I don't know offhand.
I'll tank through it.
We have the interwebs for, right?
Yeah, I'll look online and I can tank through it if that's what I have to do.
I think it's worth, for those listening, I think it's a game that's worth playing and checking out. But I do think that like half, maybe more than half of people are going to agree with Patrick. I do think it is definitely a love-hate game. Mm-hmm. It just seems like it's incredibly polarizing. You either love it or you hate it.
So there is a level select code at the start screen.
Oh, cool. There you go.
So go ahead and give that a shot again if you can get past it. I'm just curious because I've noticed like a recurring theme in like the graphic presentation. And I've always maintained that like graphics don't matter anywhere near as much as gameplay.
I agree at some part, but all of those early 3D games I still struggle with. Even back then I struggled with. I didn't like it.
Yeah.
Well,
and I mean, I grew up with the 32-bit stuff, so I kind of have I like the look of 32-bit stuff.
Yeah, and it's really only that generation, the first gen, PS1, Saturn, and 64. Like when they got the PS2, like the PS2, GameCube, Xbox, it was fine. Like
that was
I
the
could
era
get over
of muddy textures.
Yeah, I'm a fan of muddy. I'm a fan of that stuff. I can handle like really bad PS2 stuff or really bad game, and I can look past that, but. That era with the PS1, well, actually a lot of the PS1 has some charm to it, but at least some of the stuff the Saturn, I don't think so.
Sure.
So let's go ahead and go on to our next game, Sonic R.
Can you feel the sunshine, Kay?
Can I feel the sunshine?
Yeah, does it brighten up your day?
This is a game that I feel guilty about loving, but I do. I think I actually hated it back in the day. Like I borrowed it. I borrowed the disc from a friend in high school, and he's just like, go for it, man. Tell me what you think. Can
I go half and half for love and hate on this? Because I have things I love about.
Sure you can. I think that's what most people do, you know?
Because I love the soundtrack to it. Sonic R soundtrack is probably one of my favorite. I love cheesy pop music. Like I love that. Like the Metropolis Street Racer soundtrack, epic.
Oh yeah,
all that cheese factor. Even the Sonic Adventure soundtrack is probably one of my favorites.
So you like Richard Jacques then, because he did Metropolis Street Racer.
Yeah, I love that. The singer, all that stuff.
He did
all the synthy pop stuff. But yeah, I love it. I hate the gameplay. I can't play it. I bump into everything. I suck at racers in general, so having Sonic R makes it just that much worse.
Mm-hmm. I think people kind of miss the point. Well, and that's because if you didn't read the manual, which a lot of us don't, and we just kind of jump right in, we get into Sonic R thinking that it's just any other racing game, you know? And it's really not. They had this idea that, you know, the whole idea in the game would be to take shortcuts and like take as many shortcuts as you can and like explore the level while you're racing, which is kind of ridiculous because anybody who approaches a racing game would think, okay, well, my primary goal is just to win. But you can still win by, you know, scoring points, you know, finding unlockables and doing stuff like that. And really, you do end up needing those shoulder buttons in order to like stay on the track. But also, you're not really intended to stay on the track. You're actually intended to figure out how to pull off these shortcuts. I think it's kind of like Knights, where if Knights is completely confusing to you and you go on YouTube and you watch it like a Let's Play and you see that they just loop over and over and over again to rack up the multiplier, and you realize, okay, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. And then you kind of like learn how to play Knights. It kind of clicks. if you watch a Let's Play of Sonic R and see like what you're supposed to do, it's kind of oddball. And then you're like, what the hell was Sega thinking, designing this game? So in that, I think it's like, I can't forgive it. That's still kind of like ridiculous to expect anybody to just jump into the game and know that they're supposed to do that. Just Sega in general, they were putting out these games where it was like not going to hold your hand and it wasn't going to tell you what to do. And it just expected you to kind of figure it out.
I'm just more shocked of anything how expensive that game is now.
How expensive is it?
I think the last time I checked it was like in the 80s or something crazy.
So that's just because it's a Sonic game, I guess. Or
on
maybe
the Saturn.
Yeah, I don't know. That is a lot for a game that is so universally panned,
Yeah, I'm looking at 60 right now, 60, 50, so...
Wow. Well, again, it's a biased one for me. I love that soundtrack. Richard Jacques, he did, I don't know if it's Jacques or Jacques, but anyway, he did those soundtracks to that one and Sega Touring Car, and he did Shinobi Legions, and he's just awesome. And TJ... But seriously, like, don't start up the game and then pick Sonic, I think, is what most people say. Sonic is incredibly hard, one everybody wants to naturally gravitate towards, or I think he's just the default choice at first. So you might be, but if you go with like Knuckles, or if you go with the girl in the car, what's her name?
Amy.
There you go. Yeah, if you go with one of those, it's probably a little easier to come to grips with. But again, you're going to be just like Scorcher we talked about earlier, one of those things where you're just going to keep flying off the track if you don't use the shoulder buttons, because it's a combination of turning with the D-pad and using the shoulder buttons to kind of like grip the track. It's weird. And then if you do jumps, like if you hit the turbo pads and like you do a jump, you can actually jump completely over the water and do like a shortcut on the other side and just lap everybody, so there's some
that sounds
cool
like
things.
Mario Kart-ish almost.
A little bit, just not refined like that. See, Mario Kart is like, that's game design at its best, or at least quite a few of the Mario Karts. They, that's what Nintendo did best. And Sega had all these like really, really great ideas, but they didn't always have the team to execute on it. And I feel like their AM teams were awesome. And they had Team Andromeda, they had a few teams, and then, they had to farm stuff out to like Traveler's Tales, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, Well,
it's a good place for us to move on. So Albert Odyssey, this is another one that I've heard a lot of controversy about, some saying that it was amazing, another Working Designs gem, and others saying that it was, anything from boring to bland, generic. So this is one I have not played. I do know that there are two versions of it, not only in disc art, but also in file format. They actually revised the game code and updated the manual for the later revisions. What do you guys think of this one?
The thing about it is that I don't think it's an awful game. I just really think out of everything that Working Designs could have put their resource and time into, they put all that together, made this really weird Final Fantasy, Phantasy Star, and Shining Force imitation. And it really just, I don't know, it wasn't awful. It just seemed really generic, and I think it was a really poor choice, and in my opinion, Working Designs' choice to localize that out of all the things that they had on the Saturn, and that they could have brought over. Especially with all these shoot 'em ups and all the other games that they never really touched.
Yeah. I think Albert Odyssey kind of has the same kind of flavor. It kind of feels reminiscent of like Popful Mail a little bit, style-wise. It's just nowhere near as good as Popful Mail, It has kind of like that witty banter and the dialogue, which I think I might just be coming from the Working Designs, Vic Ireland side of things, so I can't speak to what the dialogue was like in the Japanese version, but I know that the way that Working Designs ported it over, it feels a lot like Popful Mail to me, but just not nearly anywhere near as good. And I know that the criticisms for this game, there's three main criticisms. The save points are few and far in between, and you have to do a lot of backtracking to find a save point, and then you have to go back out and try to advance, and work from wherever you were at. There's also another issue that plagues this game is just the load times. Getting into every battle can be so daunting. I mean, it's one of those things where it just eats up your time. And I don't know if it's any better booting from Aria. It might be a little bit better, but and I know that it's actually the Working Designs version is supposed to be significantly better than the Japanese version, which was just abysmal when it came to loading each battle. You had to just wait there for like several seconds before the HUD would come up and the enemies would show up,
Oh my gosh, imagine if they had a busted drive or a dying drive. Imagine the wait on that.
Seriously.
I would literally throw the game. I was like, you know what? I'm done with this game.
If you're playing with a Saturn that's like its lasers on its last leg, and you're playing, like a bad rip, or a bad, CDR media of this game, and it's just compounding the problem where it's just loading every battle, I can see where you might not even get an hour into this game without just throwing the disc at the wall. But I have to say this.
Or turning it into a Christmas ornament.
Yes. So to combat this, what a lot of people, or what I've done and what I've seen on forums is, people who do have access to the action replay cheats, they'll put in a code that just lowers the frequency of interactions, and then they will just double the experience multiplier to kind of offset the fewer interactions, so that us adults who don't have a lot of time to game can get through this game. But it's still, you don't lose too much, of the difficulty. It just kind of speeds things up, because it is, with the random encounters being so frequent, you end up losing literally 15 or 20 minutes in a game session just waiting for each battle to load. It all adds up over time. And then I had a friend, Fernando, on the Sega Saturn Collectors of America. My friend Fernando, he just messaged me today, and he was complaining about another issue where he went into it was either he was going into a battle, or he went into a battle and he went away from his keyboard, or he went away for over 5 minutes, and when he came back, it was just frozen. So and then he was of course, far away from a safe spot or whatever, so he had to just start all over again. And he said it's something that he has encountered a couple of times. So it's a bug. It's obviously a bug with the game that they just didn't catch,
I'm curious as to what version or what revision he has.
Well, I wasn't aware. Now, I was aware that the Working Designs was different than the Japanese version, but I didn't realize there were 2 revisions of the Working Designs. That's what you're saying? Oh, wow.
That is one of, it's not only a disc variant, but the second disc that has just the one character, the dragon looking character on it, is actually a code revision as well as a variant.
So that's the better one to get then?
I have no idea what the differences are, outside of the fact that I know that manual is physically different. It had corrections of the character names in it, and that the disc image, when you read the header on that disc, I want to say it's version 1.1 or 1.01, whereas the first version is 1.001, something.
Maybe
like
that's why people prefer the one. I've heard people say, go for the, if you're looking to buy it, go for the one with just the dragon on it. And I'm thinking I like the one with all the characters on it, but I guess there's a deeper reason to look for that. But yeah, so those 3 issues, just the loading times, unforeseen bugs that I guess they, nobody tested, walking away for 5 minutes and then coming back and everything being frozen. And then the save states or save spots just being very few and far in between. So if you're going to play this game, I think you need to action replay it in order to enjoy yourself.
Actually, do you know if he was using an action replay or some sort of RAM expander when he did that? Because I noticed the same issue on games like Street Fighter. You leave the game for 5 minutes and it just glitches out, and then you're not able to do anything.
I don't know.
Because that might be an issue with that.
Yeah, I'll ask him.
Yeah,
Fernando, if you're listening, are you using an action replay?
Or just some sort of RAM memory? Because I know some of them that we discussed in the past have issues with it. So that could be the case, and I've noticed other people run into these issues. So,
but it's buggy. That's the point. Is these were the days where there were no Well, apparently there is an update. I was telling them, there weren't patches back then. There weren't, the game was released as is, but apparently they even released a released an update, so that's interesting.
I gotcha. So the closeout. Let's see. So I personally I hate it. I think it's a shame that they couldn't have done something. Ring Design's gonna put their energy on like maybe Radiant Silvergun or maybe one of those awesome shmups we never got. What do you think, David?
Yeah, I think they could have. I think Iron Storm, was it Iron Storm?
Yeah.
Was the other I think Iron Storm and Albert Odyssey were the two kind of questionable titles where I kind of wish they would have focused their energy on other games. But
so you get love or hate on that?
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning towards hate, but there are things that I like about it. I really wish they would have just brought Lunar to the States, on the Saturn.
Nice.
That would have been nice.
All right, what about UK?
I don't see Working Designs as doing shmups. They were kind of RPG.
Well, they did that one game. What was it? They did a couple shmups though.
I just don't see, like, with the ones that I saw on the Sega CD overall and the ones on the Saturn, it just didn't seem like a genre that they were looking to try and go into.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's move into our next one, House of the Dead. I know people are going to think this is kind of weird, but for those of you that don't know or didn't listen to our Halloween cast, we mentioned that there's some issues with the graphic fidelity when it went from the System 32, right? Or was it the Model 3 or the System 32? I can't remember.
House of the Dead was Titan Video.
Titan Video?
Yeah. That's why we thought it was ridiculous that it wasn't better, because it was ported by Tantalus and it was a Sega Titan Video game, so it should have been ported over flawlessly, and it wasn't.
Yeah, so that's one of the biggest issues that a lot of people have on it is that shitty port worth playing House of the Dead? Because realistically, that and the PC game, it's the only way to play a console-wized version of House of the Dead on any system.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess, Dave, do you want to go first? What do you think about it? Do you love it? Do you hate the port?
Well, I guess, if you got a CRT and I wouldn't play it with just the controller. Let's put it that way, because that would really take all the fun factor out of it for me. But if you do happen to have a CRT and a light gun games on the Saturn are good. At least good ones are kind of few and far in between. You got the Virtua Cop games, you got Area 51, a few others. But so I really kind of like House of the Dead. I can look past the flaws on this port, and I just like it because I love House of the Dead. But I see all the things that are wrong with it. It is sloppy. It's a little ugly. Although you're shooting zombies and those are ugly anyway, so it all fits, So I guess you could say it's not a Virtua Cop 2, because of course it wasn't ported by an AAM team, but it is still, a Sega mainstay, the House of the Dead series, and I think that, like you said, it's history. The fact that you can really only play it in two formats. If you do have a way to emulate the arcade one, that might be a better experience. But, I like it. I think it's one of those biased likes, though, where I'm kind of looking past and forgiving things that other people would not.
Yeah, I'm definitely laying the same boat as you, Dave, where I agree that it's hard to play and you definitely should not play it without a CRT and a light gun. But on the other hand, to be honest, it's mostly just something you want to play with your mates or just have fun with. Mm-hmm. In terms of actually like sitting down, speedrunning it, or playing it religiously to get the highest score, I really don't think the game is worth it. The frame rate is garbage. It's ugly, frankly, to look at, and you just get awful lag, and sometimes it's hard to even see things. So yeah. I definitely, in my opinion, would not recommend it. I would lean towards hate, unless you just want to mess around with your friends or just play it. I'm gonna have to go with hate. I just don't like the port. It's a shame that's the only way to play the game. But you know what? It is what it is. Until maybe they do a remake of it, which would probably be never, because light gun games no one cares about them.
Sadly. Yeah, I wouldn't. It's definitely not worth paying that much for it,
Absolutely not.
Japanese version, right?
Yeah.
I fall pretty squarely in the love of this game, because I care about light gun games. So thanks, Dave, for telling me I'm a nobody. I'm just kidding.
I didn't say that. That was Patrick.
Oh, Pat, well, I expect that from him, so that's it.
No, I am waiting.
Well, hey! I never said anything about. I love light gun games. I'm saying that it's worthless to play without a light gun.
Sure.
Yeah, it is.
So, reality for me on this one is that as ugly as it was, this was to me the most fun I had with a light gun shooter on the Saturn, and probably one of the most fun light gun games I had since like Duck Hunt. I played Area 51. Yeah, it was okay.
It's okay.
Yeah. I played Virtua Cop, and as smooth as Virtua Cop 2's gameplay was, Virtua Cop 1 was what I had first, and this is one of those things where I had a problem with the graphics on it. Like, it felt too much like a computerized police trainer and not like an arcade game, which is what I wanted more of out of a light gun shooter. So House of the Dead really stepped up to that challenge, and I only played it maybe like twice in the arcades, so I know what it was supposed to look like if you based it off the arcade version. But I learned more about that game and how, like hitting certain targets on the screen would get you to a branching, pathway, which was kind of new to me for a light gun shooter at the time. So I'm squarely in the love of the game, but burn it, don't buy it. Unless
please, dear Lord, don't.
For sure. Yeah. And I think it makes up for itself in certain areas, like the humor, that like the B comedy, and like some of the enemies that you go up against, are the variety is nice,
Yeah, and if you really want the true House of the Dead experience, just buy the arcade unit. I don't see it anything above $500. Usually people don't even sell it for that much. I say like $400, $300. So if you really, really love the game, and you really just want to play that one specifically, and you really don't like 2, personally, I think you should just get 2 over that. But if you really love 1 and you really want to play it the best way possible and get the best score, just buy it. Just buy the arcade unit.
Buy the arcade version,
please.
Mm-hmm. This brings us to Dragon Force.
Oh, can I take this one?
Go for it. I never played it, so.
Okay, so this is. I'm surprised that people put it on like a hate list. I don't know who put it up there, but I'm definitely one of those people who did not get this game. Because here's the thing: if you were burning Saturn games and you were trying out several Saturn games to kind of see what you like, and you popped in Dragon Force, immediately you're greeted with like this complex map with castles and like the domestic affairs and all these menus. And so it just seems kind of daunting, and it's just one of those games where I was just like, I don't have time for this. On more than one occasion, I would pop it in and look at that and then just kind of put it back in the CD wallet and forget about it. And it wasn't until I actually got the game and kind of invested myself into it that I found it was like one of the best games on the Saturn. And I do hold to that.
But when you first started off, you were kind of like, why would I bother?
I was like, I don't understand. It consistently ends up on the top 10 list on every greatest Saturn game. And in some cases, it's like contending for first place with like Shining Force 3 or Radiant Silvergun. And I'm like, how is this possible? Why am I so stupid? Like, I watch the Let's Plays. I'm on YouTube. I'm reading the articles. I'm like, what don't I get about this game? Like, okay, I get the fact that once I get into a battle, if I can figure out how to do that there's like so many character sprites on the screen and these battles are epic and everything like that. And I got that, but like the problem is like the barrier to entry, if you're not reading the manual, it's just kind of hard to get over that first, okay, I get what I'm supposed to do. Once it clicks and it all makes sense, it literally is like one of the best games. I'm playing it right now. I haven't beat it yet, but I completely control the entire map, and I'm going into like the final conflict, so or the Doomsday battle or whatever. So it's really fun. It's been taking up like all of my gaming time lately.
Very nice. What about you, Pat?
I never played it personally. I have no idea what it's about, so I really can't give my opinion on Dragon Force.
Yeah. But you know that there's 8 different character campaigns that you can play, and each one of them has its own.
Sorry, Radiant Silvergun's really not that type of game, and really a better alternative is Ikaruga. I do have to say I love it for what it is. What about you, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I love the game. I do, and I love the soundtrack and the visual. You know, the graphics. I love treasure games too. So, yeah.
So that wraps up our main section. Just want to throw out some really quick honorable mentions, and then let you guys know about what's going on in our future here. Honorable mentions: Three Dirty Dwarves, kind of a little bit of a polarizing game. Some people have issues with graphics. Some people have gameplay. Got like maybe a 30-second blurb on this, Dave?
Well, Bernie Solar, you know, he said it looked like crap. And I think the game is really good. You know, I think you got these 3 characters that you can swap out. You can even play with a friend. And it's kind of like, you know, you grab a different weapon and you have to use teamwork to be able to like open certain doors or figure out certain puzzles. So it's kind of like a platformer with puzzle elements, but it's also a brawler. And then there's like these weird boss levels, and you can even do like a boss rush mode. The graphics are hand-drawn sprites, so it reminds me kind of like the Scott Pilgrim game, but on the Saturn, you know?
What about you, Pat?
I never played it, so I have zero opinion on it.
Yeah, and I have no opinion on it either, directly outside. I thought it did look a little on the ugly side, and so I didn't give it.
It does kind of look ugly.
Yeah, I know if you're judging from the FMVs or maybe the box art, then yes, it does. Yeah. But the in-game sprites are actually not bad at all. Like that's where it's like inconsistent, you know.
What about Astal? This is another one that hit a lot of lists. 30-second blurb on Astal, Pat.
I really just thought it was really clunky. It was a really difficult game for what it was supposed to be. And it just had a lot of inconsistencies with the voice acting and all the... Like, I think Astal's voice actor is completely different in the game for the US copy than the English cutscenes with him in it.
How about you, Dave?
Well, I think it's a beautiful game. I do think that the English version is actually kind of expensive these days. And from what I've heard, the Japanese version, they actually toned down the difficulty, which is what a lot of people take issue with. So maybe... look into getting the Japanese version because then you won't have that weird dubbing stuff that Patrick's talking about, and the gameplay will be a little bit easier, which is kind of odd because they usually did it in the reverse. They usually made US games a little easier. But in this case, yeah, the Japanese version, from what I've heard, Mel, Sega Lord X, you know, he told me that the Japanese version was the way to go.
Cool.
I'll check it out.
So I put this next one on the list for honorable mention, Fighters Megamix. Really quickly, this was loved by a lot of critics. It was kind of a darling love letter for Sega, a franchise that Sega did for fighting games, both elements of Fighting Vipers and Virtua Fighter. Mm-hmm. The real problem that anyone actually had with it was that it felt like the Fighting Vipers characters were OP until, you know, overpowered until you knocked their armor off, at which case they, you know, fell like toothpicks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was not balanced. It was just kind of off the wall.
I really just think you should look at definitely like the Fighters Megamix and the virtual fighter games. There's not really, you know, tournament fighters per se that you'd want to bring to a tournament. They just seem like more party games, sort of like how Smash is.
Well, modern Virtua Fighter is considered, you know, like top tier fighting.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, the modern ones I understand, but a lot of the earlier ones, it's kind of... I mean, I guess I could see it if you really want to, but it seems more like they wanted to make it more like a Smash Brothers type game. Like more fun over, you know, actual fighting mechanics, but it did inspire Tekken and stuff like, and DOA, so I can't hate it too much.
So, Dave really wanted to talk about this one. I want to give him his time. Sega Touring Car Championship.
Okay, I'll try to go quick. I just think that this is one of those games that, with such great racing games on the Saturn, like Daytona and Sega Rally, which are honestly pretty much all you need, maybe Manx TT for a motorcycle game, you're pretty much covered. And so Sega Touring Car might just seem superfluous, and because it's incredibly difficult to come to grips with, a lot of people might just overlook it and say, you know, it's not worth my time. But I love this game. There's two ways you can play really well with it. You can either look into tuning your car to handle on the track better, or just play in manual transmission mode and downshift when you get into a corner and then upshift out of it. and it just works like butter, and it really does start to make sense. And the soundtrack is Richard Jacques again, so it's just so great. It's like that Euro trance or Euro beat stuff. So that's all I'm gonna say. Oh, it had an online functionality too. It had like online leaderboard, so it was ahead of its time there too.
Oh,
so,
interesting.
Yeah, you could use the netlink and log in and post your times, and there it would also use the system clock in the Saturn so that it observed the time of day that you were playing and your time zone. So yeah,
neat. Well, that wraps up our main feature for today's podcast. Want to let you guys know about a couple of things we got going on as we enter in the holiday season. We just passed Thanksgiving here in the U.S. Dave and I are gonna do a Netlink play date. Probably gonna play some Sega Rally Championship Netlink Edition, maybe some Bomberman.
Mm-hmm.
We're scheduling that hopefully sometime in the afternoon on the West Coast time, Pacific time, on December 2nd. And we're planning on trying to do a live stream on Facebook with this on 2 different Saturn groups. We'll see how well this works out. But if you have interest in playing against either me or Dave in any of the Netlink games, hit us up through the Sega Saturn Shiro podcast page or through one of those groups and let us know.
Yep.
The Saturn Junkyard is issuing a Christmas game challenge for the Segato Sanshiro game. There's only one level related to it. You can get all the information at the Saturn Junkyard. It's in a pinned post. So if you're interested in trying to see how well you can guide Santa Segata to delivering presents to the many people who are not playing hard enough at their Sega Saturn, post up a score. You can see that over at the Saturn Junkyard. There may or may not be a Christmas Nights challenge. I think we're going to try and put that up before our next podcast in those Facebook groups. And scheduling. December is going to be pretty light for us. Our next scheduled podcast is going to happen sometime after December 17th, just because of the holidays. And that might be our only podcast for the rest of the year.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah, we know you love us.
Got families, sorry.
Big shout outs to all of you guys. I mean, in the past week, we saw a huge increase in our likes. And normally I'm pretty, self-depreciating for our group and give our shout outs to the 1.5 listeners we have, but apparently
just lost one. I'm not.
It was negative
anymore.
2 last we counted.
Well, now we dropped to 1. I stopped listening again.
Well, so just big shout outs to all you guys. Apparently we had a huge boost in likes, and we're very humbled and honored that you guys like listening to what we're doing, and please keep sending us those questions and commentary about what you want to hear on this cast.
Yeah, I mean, holy shit, we're at about 249 likes. I mean, like, just 100 this week, that's insane.
Yeah, we doubled.
Let's aim for that 2 million followers.
Right. We'll definitely try and get some more content out to you. I believe Pat's got an idea about doing a live Let's Play session during December to help fill in the void while you wait for our next show.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get something up. I'm a bit unsure what I want to play exactly. I don't want to do Knights because I suck at it, so I'm trying to think maybe do some fighters, maybe do some like the shitty fighters, see how far I can get.
You should do the shit show that day. We should just focus on the worst games we've got.
I got
Start with Mr. Bones, right? No, I'm kidding.
You should stream some Rabbit.
Rabbit, yeah. Groove on Fighting Rabbit.
Oh, dude, yeah. Play some Gundam side story. Also, play obscure stuff.
Yeah, I'll figure out what. I'll do an obscure shootout, do an hour of each one, or maybe.
And then he'll do some Mr. Bones.
Yeah, I'll do Mr. Bones challenge. See how long it takes for me to throw the disc against the wall.
Use that stage select.
So, happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Please be looking out for our next podcast. It will happen after the 17th of December.
And if you're listening to this 10 years from now, you don't even care.
Yeah, sorry for the next podcast if that's the case, if it's bad.
You can just skip it.
Right. So from all of us here at Sega Saturn Shiro, happy Thanksgiving if you're in the States, happy holidays in general, and we'll see you on the next one.
And you must play Sega Saturn.
You must. See you later, guys.